And now, here's your host, Kevin Conover.
Bring your tide and bring your shame.
Welcome to Educate for Life. I'm your host, Kevin Conover. My website is educateforlife.org. Last Saturday, I had Dr. Robert Carter on the program, and we talked about the evidence from genetics for the existence of Adam and Eve. Next Saturday, I'm going to have Dr. Doug Petrovich on the show. We'll be discussing the recent archaeological evidence showing that both Moses and Joseph were real people, not fictional characters and fictional stories. Today, my guest is paleontologist Dr. Marcus Ross. We're going to be talking about how the fossil record supports the biblical historical record. Before I bring him on, let me just tell you a little bit about him. Dr. Ross is an associate professor of geology and assistant director of the Center for Creation Studies at Liberty University in Lynchburg, Virginia. He earned a BS in earth science from Pennsylvania State University, an MS in paleontology from the South Dakota School of Mines, I believe it is, and technology, and a PhD in environmental science, geosciences from the University of Rhode Island. Dr. Ross, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for the invite, Kevin. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, you were recently a part of the movie Is Genesis History? That's a pretty cool thing that you got to be a part of. The movie did really well in the theaters. It was only in the theaters for a day, but it did fantastic. And how did you end up getting involved with that movie?
Well, let's see. A couple of years ago, I received an email and a request to talk from the producer, Tom. Tom Thomas.
We'll look his name up. That's okay.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah,
that's
Thomas
right.
Purfoy. And what really impressed me about Thomas's approach was that as he asked me for resources and things to start reading and get himself caught up on paleontology, he asked me what textbooks I used or what I could read, and I gave him a list of things. And very quickly he came back saying, "Okay, I've read through this stuff. I need to talk to you more about these things." And I was really impressed because I'm handing him, the sorts of things like college textbooks that I use with my students at Liberty University, and he reads them. Some of my students don't do that, that type of thing, and they're having tests. So I was really impressed with Thomas Purfoy's dedication, and I knew that he was doing that not just with me, but with a dozen or more of other people that were telling him things that he needed to know in order to start putting together this documentary. So his zeal and his tenacity were very, very impressive. Something that I hadn't really seen before from somebody in production, media, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I was so excited when I found out the movie was coming out, and it was kind of kept up under wraps for a long time. And then all of a sudden, boom, there it was. And how was it working with Dr. Del Tackett, and the other scientists?
It was really, really nice. I was fortunate enough to actually film on two different occasions with Dr. Tackett. We first filmed in the South Dakota Badlands and in the Black Hills, but due to some equipment choices, they didn't kind of like how those takes went. So I got to go again, and this is what you see in the film, where Dr. Tackett and I are walking through Natural History Museum out in Tennessee. And so I think I got a chance to probably interact a little bit more with Dr. Tackett than some of the other folks on the movie. And he's a fascinating individual who's seen so much in his life and is really just zealous for God. He just is passionate about presenting the truth of the gospel to people.
Yeah, for our listeners who don't know, Dr. Tackett is the one who helped produce the Truth Project, which was worldwide, a huge project that they undertook. And I actually got to interview him on the radio not too long ago. That was a big blessing. But Dr. Ross, how did you end up getting interested in paleontology? Most kids don't start off going, hey, you know what, I want to dig up bones when I get older. What turned you on to that?
Well, probably the one thing that does interest most kids, and that is dinosaurs.
That's true.
When I was a small boy, coming across dinosaurs in books and records and things like that as I was a small child, it just captivated me and absolutely fascinated me. And I was also growing up within a home where I was brought up in Christian faith. My mom is a Christian, so am I and my sister. My dad is an agnostic and remains that way today. But at the same time, our faith was always fostered and our walk with Christ was always encouraged. And so as a young kid, I started very early on recognizing that there were two different approaches that were being taken to Earth history, that the pages of the Bible were not matching up with the sorts of dinosaur books that I was reading as a kid. And so it surprised me then, but as I watch my own children and their growth and their development now, it doesn't surprise me as much that I started to recognize those differences and started trying to think about ways in which you can harmonize those in some way. And so even though I didn't know the theological terms like gap theory or day age or evolutionary creation or any ideas like that or young earth creation, I was thinking through how do you put dinosaurs and the Bible together? They're all part of the world. They're all part of what God has made and has done. And I came to the conclusion pretty early on that the Bible was intending to tell us that God created the world in 6 days like the days that we experience, and that those days were not millions of years ago, but they were only thousands of years ago. And so the dinosaur books have got to be mistaken when they say that the dinosaurs died out 65 million years ago or that the Jurassic was 150 million years ago.
Yeah, now for a long time, people have really struggled with this because, the popular culture has just continually said dinosaurs went extinct millions of years ago. But with films like Is Genesis History and all the effort that has been put forth by ministries like the one, now are you a part of Creation Ministries International? Is that correct?
No, I'm not. I teach at Liberty University, and I'm now the director of the Center for Creation Studies, which is an academic center within the university. And though I don't work, say, with Creation Ministries International or Answers in Genesis or in the Institute for Creation Research, I've worked alongside them on projects and videos and things like that. So we have a great working relationship at Liberty University with the other creation ministries, but we're a separate entity unto ourselves.
If people want to find out more about what you do and the research you've done, where can they find that information out?
Well, let's see. One thing they could do is if they type into a search engine, Marcus Ross Liberty University, then the first link that will hopefully come up will be my faculty website, and they can find out some of the publications and some of the activities that I've been doing. Another thing for them to check out actually would be the Facebook page for Cornerstone Educational Supply. A couple of years ago, my wife and I, who homeschool our kids, started up a business on the side to provide rock, mineral, and fossil kits and other science materials for homeschool and Christian school and anybody else who might be interested in them. And so I have occasional blog posts and things like that on dinosaurs, on birds, on interesting bits in the news about that. So it's kind of a company/opportunity to write about some creation topics for me. Okay,
very cool. So I'm interested in knowing what from paleontology, like you said, there's two different viewpoints. There's, hey, the strata in the earth and all the bones in the earth give evidence for, millions and millions of years, or if not billions of years of history, versus the creation account, which says that essentially there was a flood about 4,500 years ago that killed everything off, and you ended up with the fossil record created that way. As it pertains to dinosaurs and so forth, what evidence do we have from dinosaurs in the fossil record that for you makes you go, yes, it's obvious the biblical record is the right hypothesis here?
That's a very good question. One of the things that's featured in the movie Is Genesis History is a visit out to the dinosaur excavation site run by Dr. Art Chadwick. He's at Southwestern Adventist University, and he's been working on this dinosaur dig site for probably over 20 years now. And there are 10,000 duck-billed dinosaurs that are represented by hundreds of thousands of individual bones in this huge area that was very obviously a catastrophic deposit. My old age colleagues would say that it was probably a catastrophic deposit, but it was just a single event rather than part of something like Noah's flood. But I think that something like that is tied into what's going on with Noah's flood as a whole. The more that we look at geology, the more that we see that individual places where different fossil species are preserved look like catastrophic events.
Very interesting.
They look like entire ecosystems that are destroyed.
So my guest today is Dr. Marcus Ross. He's a paleontologist, and we're looking at evidence from the fossil record that there really was a worldwide flood, and that the strata don't represent millions of years, but only thousands of years. of Earth history. So we're going to be right back, and we're going to talk about these duck-billed dinosaurs and other dinosaurs too, and what the evidence supports, the Bible or evolutionary timeframes. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Jason Hall, president of Team Home Loans, a branch of Synergy One Lending. I just want to take this opportunity to thank Kevin Conover for the profound impact he's had on mine and my wife's spiritual life, as well as being an incredible teacher while our kids were his students. His knowledge and passion have taught us all how important it is to be defenders of our faith. It's our honor and privilege to support Kevin and his show. It is our sincere hope and prayer that you will continue to learn to be defenders of your faith through Kevin's radio show and through his Educate for Life teachings. Thank you, Kevin, from the Hall family and Team Home Loans.
What do leading local restaurants have in common? They depend on Express Fix Coffee for new and used coffee and espresso machines, repairs, and affordable monthly service. Dave Martin and his local team provide water filtration services too. Call San Diego's best espresso repair company, serving your home and business. Learn more online at expressfixcoffee.com. Call Express Fix Coffee at 619-867-3853. 619-867-3853. How can you live in San Diego and miss out on enjoying the water? Fast Lane Kayaking sells popular Hobie Cat kayaks that you pedal, not paddle. That means your hands are left free for fishing and fun. Just throw these on your roof rack. They're light and they're easy to use and maintain. Just rinse them off. Try one free on a demo ride. For 36 years, Ron and Debbie Lane have served San Diego with fun, family-friendly water sports of all kinds. Learn more. FastLaneSailing.com. 619-222-0766.
When you need tires or service, count on Conover Tires, Wheels, and Service in Oceanside for a full range of affordable options and all the brands you trust. See their great customer reviews and special offers online. Hours Tuesday through Friday, 7:30 to 5:30, and Saturdays, 7:30 to 5. Call Dan and his team at 760-439-1631. Conover Tires, Wheels, and Service, 2405 Oceanside Boulevard in Oceanside, 760-439-1631.
I will cast my cares on you. You're the anchor of my hope, the only one who's in control.
Thanks for listening today. This is Educate for Life. I'm your host, Kevin Conover. My website is educateforlife.org. You can pick up a recording of this program if you'd like it, if you'd like to share it with a friend. And if you've got some friends that are skeptics about creationism or creation science or dinosaurs going extinct recently, not millions of years ago, you can check out our website. We're on iTunes too, and YouTube and everything else. My guest today is Dr. Marcus Ross. He's a paleontologist at Liberty University, where he's also a professor there. And he was recently involved with the movie Is Genesis History? And they talked to him about these sorts of things. And Dr. Ross, when we left off from the break, you said that there are about 10,000 duck-billed dinosaurs in this one deposit here, this excavation site. That's an incredible amount of dinosaurs. Is that something that's kind of an anomaly, or do you find these around the world? Do you find these kind of large fossil graveyards?
Well, the one that Dr. Chadwick is excavating out in Wyoming with the 10,000 is huge. That's a really, really big unit out there. But we can trace ourselves along the American West in a few other places. Dinosaur National Park, which is on the border between Utah and Colorado, has likewise got thousands of different dinosaurs that are buried and deposited in rock units that are exposed in that area. We can go to places like in Kansas, where there are big marine reptiles that I studied for my PhD called mosasaurs, and there are probably thousands upon thousands of mosasaurs in some of the rocks out over there. And so, we find that there are sometimes these event beds, as we call them in geology, where we've got something like this going on. In other cases, we just are fortunate enough to have lots of exposed rocks of a particular area that have a lot of fossils in them. So sometimes, especially when we're thinking about a terrestrial group of herding animals like these big duck-billed dinosaurs, they would have been traveling together and walking together. Then Noah's flood comes through and wipes them all out together. In other cases, you've got animals that are more isolated, Especially in the marine realm, you don't always have animals that are all together, but sometimes you do. So it's a bit complex because Noah's flood is not a simple affair.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Now, when you said mosasaurs, I'm not real familiar with that dinosaur. You said that's a marine dinosaur, is that correct?
Yeah, so mosasaurs are actually lizards. So we can think of them kind of like, if your listeners imagine for a moment, close their eyes and think of a Komodo dragon. And instead of arms and legs, put flippers on it instead. Then toss them out into the ocean and let them grow anywhere from about 10 to over 50 feet in length.
Oh, my goodness.
These were absolutely, yeah, exactly. This is a big lizard. And unlike dinosaurs, mosasaurs were true lizards. They really were in that broader family or order of reptiles, whereas dinosaurs are a different group altogether. They don't share very many similarities with lizards.
What is the difference between a lizard and a dinosaur?
Okay, good question. Let's first think of what's the difference between, say, a lizard and a crocodile. So when you think of a lizard, they're typically a little smaller. Their scales are different from crocodiles. Like when you look at crocodiles, you see those big kind of plate-like scales going down their back.
Yeah.
And lizards generally have more pebbly scales, or even snakes that have scales that overlap one another a little bit to help them move smoothly. There's, for geologists and for anatomists and biologists, you can tell a lot of differences in the skulls between those two big groups. And when we look at dinosaurs and compare them, we find that the dinosaurs have more physical similarities to things like crocodiles and alligators than they do to any of the lizards that are out there, your geckos and your monitor lizards and Gila monsters, things like that. So in addition, with things like dinosaurs, dinosaurs walked with their legs directly underneath them. So even more different than things like crocodiles and alligators, they walked upright in a sense with their legs right underneath their body. And that's very efficient for moving around, as we certainly know, because we're able to do the same thing. So when we look at dinosaurs and we try and classify them and compare them to other types of animals, they come out a little bit closer to crocodilians. They have some similarities to birds as well, at least some of them do. But they're pretty distinct from lizards. You wouldn't be able to let a lizard grow for 200 years and end up with a T-Rex.
Oh,
it would
interesting.
just be a really, really big lizard.
So that was a kind of one of my next questions, which was, as I understand it, one of the arguments for why dinosaurs got so big was the very fact that they could live so long, based on biblical records that people lived longer in the past. Other animals also lived longer in the past, and therefore certain animals which didn't have a limit on necessarily how big they would grow because they got to live so long, they would grow a lot bigger. Is that accurate?
Honestly, I'd say probably not, because when we look at something like lizards and crocodiles, even though they do continue growing throughout their life, that growth rate slows down considerably.
Okay.
So if we took a modern crocodile and let it live for 300 years, let's just say, it would grow to be pretty large, but if it was a Nile crocodile, something like that, it probably still wouldn't get any bigger than 20 feet, just because over time that growth rate doesn't stay constant. It slows. So we also have a slight concern about saying that the other animals were living just as long as humans were. We don't know that from Scripture, so we have to remember that that's an inference from, or an extrapolation from Scripture rather than anything that's specifically stated.
Okay.
It could be that we lived long precisely because we were made in the image of God, and there was something about that God wanted us to live initially a very, very long time, or even immortally before the fall.
So from a paleontology perspective, we look at certain animals in the fossil record, and you see what look like animals that are similar to animals we have today, but they are a lot bigger. You have a rhinoceratoid that's huge, or you have fossils of that they found of kangaroos or other animals that seem to be very similar to what we have today. They're just much bigger. How would you explain that from a biblical paleontology scientific perspective?
Oh, good question. We get fascinated by the things that are really big.
Yeah.
I mean, that's part of what got me interested in dinosaurs as a kid. They're huge, they're monstrous. The average size of a dinosaur, though, is actually about the size of a American bison, or about the size of a rhino. So dinosaurs as a whole could get very large, but many of them were also pretty small. And the same thing goes with some of the animals that we have around today that have, say, Ice Age mammal relatives.
Yeah.
The woolly mammoth, we think, it's huge. We even use the word mammoth to describe how big something is. And the woolly mammoth was probably about the same size as a modern-day African elephant. It wasn't any larger than that. And likewise with the mastodon, we don't have anything that's kind of Lord of the Rings Oliphant size in the fossil record.
Yeah.
But we do have examples of animals that are much larger than their contemporaries. There is a centipede species that is 6 feet long, and that's terrifying.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I wouldn't let my kids play in the backyard if they still existed.
Oh no, it's horrible. I know over at the university, or not the university, the Field Museum in Chicago has got a mock-up of one of those things, and it's creepy. There were dragonflies or dragonfly-like types of creatures that had a wingspan of nearly 2 feet from one end of the wings to the other. And praise the Lord, they're not with us anymore.
Yeah.
They're dead, and that's a good thing. But even things like trilobites, the cute little kind of underwater bugs that people can collect and find, the biggest of those is no bigger than the biggest of the crabs that we have alive today. In fact, Alaskan king crab is overall probably a little bit bigger than even the largest of the trilobites. So there are some evidences that we have some things that were really big in the past, but not so, not monstrous in size for the most part.
Okay,
We're only monstrous because we're used to thinking of something much smaller as their representative.
Yeah. So my guest today is Dr. Marcus Ross. He's at Liberty University. He's a paleontologist, and he was recently involved with the movie Is Genesis History, and got to talk about the evidence from the fossil record that supports Genesis as history, not as a mythical tale. We're going to continue to have this conversation. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Before I bring my need, I will bring my heart.
Hi, this is Kevin Conover. Will you please donate to Educate for Life so we can share the truth of God's Word with kids in public schools? You can donate online at donatetoefl.org. The Bible used to be read in public schools on a regular basis prior to the 1960s. But today, most kids are completely clueless when it comes to the content and the historical and scientific accuracy of the Bible. Please help us by donating online at donatetoefl.org.
Hi, this is Jason Hall, President of Team Home Loans, a branch of Synergy One Lending. I just want to take this opportunity to thank Kevin Conover for the profound impact he's had on mine and my wife's spiritual life, as well as being an incredible teacher while our kids were his students. His knowledge and passion have taught us all how important it is to be defenders of our faith. It's our honor and privilege to support Kevin and his show. It is our sincere hope and prayer that you will continue to learn to be defenders of your faith through Kevin's radio show and through his Educate for Life teachings. Thank you, Kevin, from the Hall family and Team Home Loans.
Hi, I'm Marissa Conover, and I would love to help you buy or sell your home. I've worked as a realtor for more than 13 years, and as a San Diego native, my passion and experience will help make your move as peaceful as can be. Call me at 619-251-1577. That's 619-251-1577, or visit conoverhomes.com.
This is Throughout All Ages Ministry with Joe and Stacy. We would like to equip you to share the gospel with confidence in a biblical and effective way.
We would like to teach you through the proclamation of the gospel.
Whether you're the skeptic, God who created you said that he has made himself known to you so that you are without excuse.
One-on-one evangelism.
How do you think you can get to heaven? I've never really thought about it, but I've always thought of, doing good.
For more information, go throughoutallages.com, like us on Facebook, or visit us at YouTube at Throughout All Ages.
I'm giving it all away. No more hiding, no more stalling. I hear you calling me.
Thanks for tuning in to Educate for Life. I'm your host, Kevin Conover. My website's educateforlife.org. If you want to pick up a recording of this show, I also have tons of classes online, homeschool classes and so forth that you can check out there. You can watch them on your phone or your iPad or your computer. They've got quizzes and follow-along notes and tests and so forth. Answers all kinds of questions regarding the historical accuracy of the Bible, the scientific foresight of the Bible, and also deals with all kinds of pop culture questions and things that we have to deal with as Christians, and read the Bible and understand how to approach these different issues like abortion or homosexuality or these sorts of things. So please check that out if you get a chance, and I'd love to hear from you. My guest today is Dr. Marcus Ross. And Dr. Ross, we were talking when we left off the last segment about animals in the fossil record and the size of the animals. I wanted to just ask one more question. So as it pertains to animals that are bigger than what we would normally expect, your answer to that would be these are animals that used to exist, but they've gone extinct, generally speaking. They're not animals that are they animals that are related to animals that we have today? Like, you have the bivalves that are huge that you see in museums, or you have like the super croc that's like supposedly grew up to 40 feet long. How would you respond to that issue?
Yeah, some of them are very close relatives of the things that we have today. Some of them are a little bit more distant, probably not part of the same created kind.
Okay.
So in thinking about that for your listeners, one thing that creation paleontologists and creation biologists are very interested in right now is how do we identify and define the kinds of animals that God created? What level does that belong to? So if we look at all the finches in the world, are all the finches part of a single created kind that diversified after Noah's Ark landed and he released the birds and the other animals? So when we're thinking of some of these big creatures like the super croc that you mentioned, that would be up to paleontologists like me to try and evaluate whether or not the super croc fits into one of the existing living families that's here today, and whether or not its record in the rocks indicates that it was alive after the flood was done, or if all of the fossils of it are only recovered in the flood rocks. So, for example, we don't have any fossils of dinosaurs, at least that I've recognized, that are found in rocks that I think are formed after the flood is done. So it looks like dinosaurs died out pretty quick after any of them were brought on board the Ark and didn't really have a chance to reestablish themselves. So the pursuit of trying to discover and identify these created kinds will play into our understanding as to whether or not some of these big critters are just big versions of what we have around today, or whether they reflected a different kind that had been created.
Okay, and so and when we're referring to kinds, what we're trying to figure out is where do you draw the line between one kind of animal versus another, and as it relates to biology today, we're talking about. So one of the questions that relates to this that comes up a lot is, is species the same thing as kind? And how do we have a discussion with somebody who's not a creationist in regards to these issues? Because they don't use the word kinds, generally speaking. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Because for creationists, one of the things that we're interested in are what are the groups of animals that God created when he said in Genesis 1, for example, that he created all the creeping things according to their kinds, or all the livestock according to their kinds, or all the birds according to their various kinds. These are the sorts of terms that the Bible is using. And then he said that they were going to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. So it seems like reproduction is an important thing that helps us identify what groups of animals are part of one creation by God as opposed to animals that are part of a different creation by God, even on the same day. So if we look at birds today, we recognize that the hawks and the sparrows are just very different types of animals. There's nothing very similar about them besides the fact that they are birds. So creation biologists might be looking at the sparrows and maybe some other similar types of birds and say, based on the way that they breed with each other, we can connect a bunch of the species. So we're accustomed to thinking about biology in terms of species, but the creationist is asking, is there a real unit that's actually bigger than the species that might have several species in them? So if we think about sparrows, we've got the European sparrow, we've got a variety of other ones. if it can be shown that those sparrows can interbreed with one another and produce little baby sparrows, then maybe that tells us that they are part of the same created kind. But a sparrow and a hawk can't reproduce and create a spark or something that out of the two of them. And so that lack of ability to breed together and produce offspring might tell us where the boundaries are, or at least some of the boundaries between those kinds.
So species is essentially making more fine delineations between animals, whereas kind is a broader than species. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly right. Within the kind, there are likely going to be several different species for different groups of animals. Amongst the vertebrate animals like mammals and birds and reptiles, the biological level called family seems to be pretty close to what we think the biblical kind is. It might not be exactly there, but it seems to be pretty close. And so when we think of a species, it usually has two names to it, like our own species is Homo sapiens. Homo is the genus name, sapiens is the species name. Our dogs are part of Canis familiaris. So if we think about the dogs as a kind, we've got our house dogs and our domestic dogs, but there are other members of the genus Canis, like the wolf or the coyote. And then there's other members within the canid family, the dog family, like a couple of different species of wolves or foxes. So through understanding their mating abilities to produce offspring, to looking at their physical similarities or dissimilarities in their skeletons or behaviors, creation geologists are thinking, and creation biologists are thinking that maybe the dog family represents a kind that God created and was brought on the ark by Noah later on, and all the species of dogs, all the different species of dogs that we have in the world today are animals that have specialized since the flood was over and done.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, I wanted to ask you about the fossil record in regards to, generally speaking, if you look at evolutionary theory, they're going to say, the farther you go down in the earth, the farther in the earth's strata, you get down to creatures that are less and less evolved. So then the higher you go in the strata, you get to people at the top, and there's dinosaurs in there, and so forth and so on. So in your experience as a paleontologist, and you're looking at this strata and so forth, how would you argue that this fits a creation hypothesis where the fossil record's made by the flood versus an evolutionary thesis that says, no, this is the sequence of evolution from bottom to top? What do you see in the fossil record?
It's a good question, and it's not an easy one to respond with an answer, just in part because it's a complicated situation. The first thing that your listeners need to know is that there is an order to the fossil record. We do, in fact, have organisms that are rather different from anything we have alive today, mostly down towards the bottom, and most of the stuff that's at the bottom are marine animals, and especially marine invertebrates, little shelled types of creatures like the trilobites or
Dr. Ross, I'm sorry. I asked you that question. I know the answer is long. I asked it to you right when we're coming up here on a break, so we're going to have to stay over to the break here. So,
no problem at all.
Okay, thank you. So, if you're listening, we're answering this question about the strata and the fossil record with Dr. Marcus Ross. We're going to be right back, and we'll continue that discussion.
Hi, this is Jason Hall, president of Team Home Loans, a branch of Synergy One Lending. I just want to take this opportunity to thank Kevin Conover for the profound impact he's had on mine and my wife's spiritual life, as well as being an incredible teacher while our kids were his students. His knowledge and passion have taught us all how important it is to be defenders of our faith. It's our honor and privilege to support Kevin and his show. It is our sincere hope and prayer that you will continue to learn to be defenders of your faith through Kevin's radio show and through his Educate for Life teachings. Thank you, Kevin, from the Hall family and Team Home Loans.
This is Throughout All Ages Ministry with Joe and Stacy. We would like to equip you to share the gospel with confidence in a biblical and effective way.
We would like to teach you through the proclamation of the gospel.
Whether you're the skeptic, God who created you said that he has made himself known to you so that you are without excuse.
One-on-one evangelism.
How do you think you can get to heaven? I've never really thought about it, but I've always just thought of, doing good.
For more information, go throughoutallages.com, like us on Facebook, or visit us at YouTube at Throughout All Ages.
When you need tires or service, count on Conover Tires, Wheels, and Service in Oceanside for a full range of affordable options in all the brands you trust. See their great customer reviews and special offers online. Hours Tuesday through Friday, 7:30 to 5:30, and Saturdays, 7:30 to 5. Call Dan and his team at 760-439-1631. Conover Tires, Wheels, and Service, 2405 Oceanside Boulevard in Oceanside, 760-439-1631.
Do you have one-button espresso machines in your home or business? They make delicious coffee drinks, but they're not maintenance-free. Express Fix Coffee is San Diego's source for coffee and espresso machine repair, sales, and service. Call Dave Martin at Express Fix Coffee for new and used espresso machines, repairs, parts, and accessories. They'll save you time and money. Call Express Fix Coffee at 619-867-3853. Learn more at expressfixcoffee.com.
There's got to be more than going back and forth, from doing right to doing wrong, because we were taught that's who we are.
Thanks for tuning in to Educate for Life. I'm your host, Kevin Conover. My website is Educate for Life, and I appreciate you being here today on this, sharing your Saturday with us. And my guest today is Dr. Marcus Ross, and we are examining the fossil record and what it tells us about Earth history, about where we came from, and what happened in the past. So he is a creationist. He's at Liberty University. He's a creation scientist and a paleontologist. And Dr. Ross, we left off talking about how you said that this is a complex question as far as, when we look at the strata in the Earth, which does it support? Does it support the flood hypothesis, that the fossil record was created by the flood, or does it support the evolutionary theory that this is the progress of evolution from bottom to top? And can you pick up where you left off?
Sure. So we start off saying that we have to recognize that there is an order to the fossil record, that we don't have just a jumbled mess of everything every place. Instead, there is an order where generally we have invertebrate, shelly types of marine creatures on the bottom. And as we go higher and higher up through our layers of strata, through our layers of rock, we come into amphibians and reptiles and eventually dinosaurs and other creatures, and then we get into mammals, and up at the top are the sorts of animals that we're most familiar with, the things that we have kind of around with us here today. And so from a young Earth creation standpoint, this had been surprising in the history of geology, because people were expecting that Noah's flood would make a jumbled mess of things. But our experience with floods is with honestly very small ones, rivers that overflood their banks and cause havoc for people, flash floods, things like that, none of which actually model Noah's flood particularly well. And what Noah's flood is doing is largely, as God lays it out in Genesis chapter 6, that he says that he's going to destroy the earth with the earth, that he's going to use the planet, in a sense, to destroy itself. And as the flood waters begin to cover the earth, they start doing so by taking these deep water marine environments and burying them. And as more and more water covers more and more parts of the earth, then you get different ecosystems becoming transitional towards land, more on land, and so on and so forth. And those different ecosystems end up getting piled vertically to make these. So those are the sorts of things that we see as a pattern. It looks to me, as I step back and look at the whole thing, that the flood is burying animals from the marine record earlier than the terrestrial record later on. And so the flood is telling me about the order in which things are being destroyed over the course of the flood's year, not a record of hundreds of millions of years of evolution and development over time.
Okay, so from a creationist perspective, what we're essentially, the explanation is that it's basically the world is being buried from the bottom up, and naturally you would see smaller marine creatures on the bottom, and then what seem to be higher level vertebrates on the top. Is that correct?
That's correct. If you think about it today, you wouldn't expect to find fossil remains of human beings mixed together with deep water crabs and fish and things like that out in the open ocean, because we don't live in anywhere near the same kinds of environments. And so given that that's going to be the same truth in the pre-flood world, you're not going to find T-Rex and trilobite fossils together, because T-Rex lives in a terrestrial environment and the trilobites are living in these underwater marine worlds. So I wouldn't anticipate them being found together in any sort of way.
But what's interesting is that I was looking into this. The Kentucky State fossil is a brachiopods, and they have these clamshells. And even here, I'm in Southern California in San Diego. If you go out into our desert, there is all kinds of shells, like fossilized shells. So, and then we do. There are places where you have marine and land fossils, and like you even said, the mosasaur is a marine dinosaur, or you said lizard or dinosaur.
Yeah.
And so, and yeah, it's buried pretty far inland. So
it is.
So is this evidence for the flood? Would you argue that that's evidence for the flood?
Yeah, I think that it is, because the world's oceans are being pushed further and further into what is now certainly land, and at the time of the flood was at least partially covered as land with water at that time. It is kind of interesting when you think, and we show kind of a map in the movie of where these marine mosasaurs are found, and they're all found in land-based exposures of rock, from South Dakota to Wyoming to Kansas to Alabama. California has got a good mosasaur record as well, and it's all in kind of the hills and the mountains. Now, those hills and mountains were formed actually by the flood. The rocks started off kind of flat and then got crumpled and crunched. But yeah, we have good evidence that water covered the entire planet at various points of time in the rock layers. And the Cretaceous, that has things like the dinosaurs and the mosasaurs, is probably representing really the peak or ending phases of Noah's flood.
Okay. And then how would an evolutionist explain the fact that you find all these marine fossils, pretty far inland in different, continents and so forth?
Sure. So for my evolutionary and my old age colleagues, they're going to argue that the continent at the time was depressed or kind of pulled downward because of certain plate tectonic types of things, which we don't need to get into here. But they do have certain mechanisms by which parts of the continents can be kind of drawn further down and ocean waters can be higher. Now, in their model, they don't have the world completely covered with water at any one time. And so we do see some differences in terms of how much water covers the world in their models versus ours. But they do have ideas about how many times, for example, we had very, very high standing water that covered lots of the continents for long periods of time. So they have a couple of reasons why they think the ocean could have been on land, but it's a different set of mechanisms than what Noah's flood advocates like myself would have.
So is this kind of a point that we have to just agree to disagree, or is there actual evidence that would sway a person one way or another, because they have their theory and we have our theory? And is it kind of like, well, you choose which paradigm you want to go with, or does the evidence sway us?
Right. Certainly, as a scientist, I hope that the evidence can sway us. I don't want to look at creation and evolution as kind of a science in postmodernism sort of thing, where you've got your view and I've got mine, and we can all be happy that we have our own views. Ultimately, we have to remember that there's just one single history to this world. And hopefully that history is, at least in part, discoverable to us using science. But when we've got testimony from God's Word about some of the events that happened, if we recognize that God is telling us about historical events, then it's important that we use those historical events to bracket our theories in some way, to put some parameters around them so that we don't go off into the wrong area, so we don't make hypotheses that are going to be incorrect, even if they seem convincing. And I think that's where we are kind of with evolutionary theory and with old Earth ideas, is that they seem quite reasonable and they seem like they could be correct, but ultimately they're not. They're off by a little bit, and that's where we see some of these anomalies keep popping up in the ways that we might interpret the rock record. They're close, but there's a few other things that I think that a global flood is able to explain in addition to all the things that the old Earth theory is already explaining.
My guest today is Dr. Marcus Ross. He's a paleontologist at Liberty University. And when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more, finish this subject off, talk a little bit more about the anomalies that he's referring to in paleontology that actually give us reason to believe that the flood hypothesis and the creation hypothesis, as outlined in the biblical record, is the more plausible theory to go with. We'll be right back.
For 36 years, Fast Lane Kayaking has helped people like you experience everything that's great about San Diego. Fast Lane makes fishing and water sports fun and easy. Hobie Cat kayaks feature a popular pedal system, not paddles, keeping your hands free as you fish. You no longer need to tow and gas up a boat to experience great San Diego fishing. Call or come in for your no-charge demo ride. 619-222-0766. FastlaneSailing.com. At Dana Landing Marina across from SeaWorld. 619-222-0766.
Hi, this is Jason Hall, president of Team Home Loans, a branch of Synergy One Lending. I just want to take this opportunity to thank Kevin Conover for the profound impact he's had on mine and my wife's spiritual life, as well as being an incredible teacher while our kids were his students. His knowledge and passion have taught us all how important it is to be defenders of our faith. It's our honor and privilege to support Kevin and his show. It is our sincere hope and prayer that you will continue to learn to be defenders of your faith through Kevin's radio show and through his Educate for Life teachings. Thank you, Kevin, from the Hall family and Team Home Loans.
Hi, I'm Marissa Conover, and I would love to help you buy or sell your home. I've worked as a realtor for more than 13 years, and as a San Diego native, my passion and experience will help make your move as peaceful as can be. Call me at 619-251-1577. That's 619-251-1577, or visit conoverhomes.com.
I will cast my cares on you. You're the anchor of my hope, the only one who's in control. I will cast my
Welcome back to Educate for Life. I'm your host, Kevin Conover. My website's educateforlife.org. Thanks for listening today. My guest today is Dr. Marcus Ross, and he was recently involved with Is Genesis History, a great resource if you want to check it out. They have, I believe this is going to be on DVD and everything. It was in the movie theaters. And talks all about how Genesis is actual history. It's not a fictional story. It's not made up. The time frames are all accurate and gives the evidence for that. So, Dr. Ross, one of the things from paleontology, of course, with dinosaurs, out in Arizona, there's a huge amount of dinosaur tracks. I think it's the largest one in North America. It's on an Indian reservation, and it's just sitting out there, and people can go and check it out. And the question is, how do these dinosaur tracks get there from a biblical flood theory? And if you're an evolutionist, how do you explain dinosaur tracks still being there from 65 million years ago? I'm just curious to hear the differing views on this.
Sure. So obviously, if you've got an animal that's walking across kind of a muddy, sandy beach, they'll be able to leave some trackways. And our normal experience is that these trackways don't last very long because waves come in and destroy them if we're walking along the beach or something like that. And so for an animal like a dinosaur to leave a set of trackways that are going to be preserved means that the next layer of sediment, the next layer of sand or mud that will cover over this stuff has got to be laid down quite quickly, and it's got to protect them from the action of waves and other sorts of things that would then destroy them, which is, the normal experience that we have with these. So for both the young Earth creationists and the evolutionists, we both recognize that in order for trackways to form, you've got to have a track maker, and then you've got to quickly cover and protect those tracks. Now, in a flood scenario, this makes quite a bit of sense because the flood is not going to just rise continuously. There's going to be kind of pulses. And every once in a while, there'll be little bits of land that are exposed, so some of the animals that are still alive are trying to escape the flood are leaving trackways, and then the next wave of the flood kind of comes in and buries those trackways.
So when you say
survive,
when you say pulses, what you're referring to is almost like a gradual tide increase that you would see at a beach. Where is that what you're talking about? That the waters are slowly covering the continents? Is that what's happening?
Sort of. You'll certainly have kind of tides going on, but let's say that there's a big tsunami that happens due to an underwater earthquake.
Okay.
So the dinosaurs were walking along the sandy beach. They left their trackways, and then a tsunami wave comes in, and tsunami waves carry a lot of dirt and sand and sediment, and that stuff will then cover over those trackways and protect them from the rest of the waves that are coming in afterwards. That tsunami might also, get those dinosaurs and pick them up and bury them, and typically bury them back somewhere above where the trackways were left.
So if these
things that we see,
if these footprints in Arizona are, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of them. So can you paint a picture for our listeners? What would be the scenario here of these dinosaurs in Arizona and all these footprints? What's the time frames here? The historical.
Yeah, I would say that during Noah's flood, the time frame might be hours to a day or two between when they were walking around and leaving these track sites to when those track sites are covered, and then the dinosaurs are later captured by the rising tides, the waves, the tsunamis that are coming in. And so sometimes you see an offset between the tracks and the track makers. And that makes sense from a biblical standpoint, because if there isn't much time between when the animals were walking and making the tracks, and then their bodies are found somewhere in the rocks above, then you say, okay, there was only a few hours. But if you're looking from an old Earth perspective, there might be something like several hundred thousand years or a couple millions of years in between the tracks and the track makers. And that doesn't make very much sense at all, because if you can possibly preserve trackways, which are hard to do, they're very delicate. Bones and teeth and shells are much easier to preserve. So you should have the remains of the animal's bones below, next to, and with the tracks if the Earth is ancient. But if the Earth is young and we're experiencing a global flood, then finding trackways below, meaning before, you find the bodies makes a lot of sense. The animals were running away and escaping. Their trackways are buried, and then moments later, hours later, they are being buried as well.
Okay, that makes sense.
So what this tells us about the fossil record sometimes is that there's no time. Even though my old age colleagues might infer there to be hundreds of thousands of years or millions of years between some of the layers, there really isn't. There's no time between the tracks that are made and the animals that are captured and destroyed.
That makes sense. Okay, and then the big one that's come up recently is that people are finding soft tissue in dinosaur bones. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, and not just preserved soft tissue like the imprint of a muscle, but actually the physical remains of, say, something like a Tyrannosaurus. Tyrannosaurus femur, discovered by Dr. Mary Schweitzer and published in 2005. She identified still intact branching blood vessels, probably little blood cells in them. Later on, she discovered a duck-billed dinosaur bone that also had these blood vessels. It also had intact cells, bone-forming cells. And you could grab these things with a pair of tweezers and kind of pull them, and they would stretch and snap back into place, just like a vein or artery would do today. So Schweitzer and now additional scientists are discovering that the fossil record is actually somewhat rich in these unmineralized, still preserved soft tissues, original soft tissues in things like the leg bones and the arm bones of dinosaurs. Now, if you think that the Earth is millions or billions of years old and these dinosaurs are tens of millions of years old, you have a real problem in identifying how these things could possibly be preserved for that long, because just normal chemistry breaks everything down in fairly short order. It's surprising enough that they would be preserved for 4,000 or 5,000 years in a creation viewpoint. Mm-hmm. It's far less likely, far to the point of nigh impossible, that these things could be preserved for 66 or 80 million years of time.
Now, I've heard that Mary Schweitzer is evolutionist. How do you continue to hold on to your evolutionary paradigm with that kind of evidence?
Mm-hmm. Well, Mary Schweitzer certainly is an evolutionist. She believes that the Earth is ancient, and to her credit, she has been trying to work on discovering a chemistry that would preserve these materials for very, very long periods of time. I don't think that she's solved that, but she is convinced by things like radioactive decay, which obviously we don't have time to talk about today, but the radioactive decay dates that we use in geology, she's convinced that those are reliable, and therefore, if there is soft tissue in these dinosaurs, which she believes because she discovered it, then there has to be some sort of chemistry that can preserve them. And so she's on the hunt to discover what that chemistry is. So she's being a consistent scientist, and she's being a very good scientist as well. She's confronted with a problem and looking for what the solution is.
Yeah.
I happen to think that the solution is an abandonment of the long ages, not a search for a chemistry that might preserve them for tens of millions of years.
Dr. Ross, thank you so much for being on the program with us today. I really appreciate it and everything you're doing, and it's just been fantastic. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate the chance to speak to you and speak to your listeners today.
Absolutely. And if people want to get in touch with you, they can just type your name in for at Liberty University, right?
That's right. They'll find me there, or you can find me through Cornerstone Educational Supply on the web.
Fantastic. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground the last few weekends. On Saturdays, I've had Dr. Petrovich is coming up next week. Had Dr. Carter on last week, and Dr. Ross on this week. So check us out on iTunes or YouTube. And thanks for joining us this Saturday. I hope you can see that you can trust the Bible. Its record is historical. It's not fictional. It's not a fairy tale. And you can put your hope and trust in the Word of God. Thanks for being here, and I hope you have a fantastic Saturday.
Did you miss part of today's program? Don't worry, we're committed to helping you get the info you need. Okay, that was dumb, but for real, visit educateforlife.com for podcast and video recordings of the show and to sign up for the School of Unshakable Faith. Leave us your comments, compliments, questions, or concerns at 800-243-9719 or email kevcon@educateforlife.com. That's KEVCON at educateforlife.com.
You will always be much more.